According to the authors of the Urantia book, Ruth, the youngest of Jesus' siblings, was born about 7 months after their father Joseph was killed in a construction accident. Jesus' sisters are mentioned in the Bible, but not by name. See Matthew 13:56 and Mark 6:3. Since Jesus took on the role of father to his brothers and sisters, he was in effect the only father Ruth ever knew. Ruth came to idolize Jesus not just as a wonderful brother-father figure, but also as a great spiritual leader. The authors of the papers about Jesus in the Urantia book give us the following information about Ruth. In paper 126, the authors tell us this about the birth of Ruth. On Wednesday evening, April 17th, A.D. 9, Ruth, the baby of the family, was born, and to the best of his ability, Jesus endeavored to take the place of his father in comforting and ministering to his mother during this trying and peculiarly sad ordeal. For almost a score of years, until he began his public ministry, no father could have loved and nurtured his daughter any more affectionately and faithfully than Jesus cared for little Ruth. And he was an equally good father to all the other members of his family. In the following quotations from paper 127, the authors tell us a bit about the girls in the family. As soon as Ruth grew up, she was taken in hand by Miriam and Martha. Ordinarily, the girls of Jewish families received little education, but Jesus maintained, and his mother agreed, that girls should go to school the same as boys. And since the synagogue school would not receive them, there was nothing to do but conduct a home school especially for them. Miriam was a well-balanced and level-headed daughter, with a keen appreciation of things noble and spiritual. Martha was slow in thought and action, but a very dependable and efficient child. Baby Ruth was the sunshine of the home. Though thoughtless of speech, she was most sincere of heart. She just about worshipped her big brother and father, but they did not spoil her. She was a beautiful child, but not quite so comely as Miriam, who was the belle of the family, if not of the city. In paper 128, the authors tell us this about Ruth as a child. This year, his seasons of deep meditation were often broken into by Ruth and her playmates. And always was Jesus ready to postpone the contemplation of his future work for the world and the universe that he might share in the childish joy and youthful gladness of these youngsters, who never tired of listening to Jesus relate the experiences of his various trips to Jerusalem. They also greatly enjoyed his stories about animals and nature. A visit with Ruth at Capernaum just before Jesus began his public ministry is described in this quotation from paper 145. Late one Friday evening, Jesus' baby sister Ruth secretly paid him a visit. They spent almost an hour together in a boat anchored a short distance from the shore. No human being, save John Zebedee, ever knew of this visit, and he was admonished to tell no man. Ruth was the only member of Jesus' family who consistently and unwaveringly believed in the divinity of his earth mission from the times of her earliest spiritual consciousness right on down through his eventful ministry, death, resurrection, and ascension. And she finally passed on to the worlds beyond, never having doubted the supernatural character of her father-brother's mission in the flesh. Baby Ruth was the chief comfort of Jesus as regards his earth family, throughout the trying ordeal of his trial, rejection, and crucifixion. In paper 154 of the Urantia book, Ruth's attitude about an attempt by Jesus' mother and his brothers to dissuade him from his public ministry is described. Some Pharisees had been talking to Mary and her children, trying to convince them that Jesus was demented and that they should try to dissuade him from further public work. Accordingly, Mary and her sons set out to talk with Jesus at an important meeting he was having at the Zebedee home in Capernaum with the apostles and many disciples. The authors relate this to us. Of all his family in the flesh, only one, Ruth, believed wholeheartedly and continuously in the divinity of his mission on earth. Jude and James and even Joseph still retained much of their faith in Jesus, but they had permitted pride to interfere with their better judgment and real spiritual inclinations. Mary was likewise torn between love and fear, between mother love and family pride. While Ruth could not explain all of his conduct, she insisted that he had always treated his family fairly and refused to agree to the program of trying to dissuade him from further work. They had expected to meet Jesus, take him aside, and urge him to go home with them. They had thought to assure him that they would forget his neglect of them. They would forgive and forget, if he would only give up the foolishness of trying to preach a new religion which could bring only trouble to him and dishonor upon his family. To all of this, Ruth would say only, "I will tell my brother that I think he is a man of God, and that I hope he would be willing to die before he would allow these wicked Pharisees to stop his preaching." Joseph promised to keep Ruth quiet while the others labored with Jesus. Unquote. Ruth and David Zebedee. David Zebedee was the brother of the apostles James and John Zebedee. He was not one of the apostles, but did come to believe in Jesus' mission. He organized a messenger corps of runners who were believers to keep Jesus' scattered followers aware of Jesus' comings and goings. After Jesus' resurrection, David dispatched the messengers to spread the word that Jesus had risen from the dead. But amidst all the sadness about Jesus' death, there was a bright spot for Ruth and David. In paper 190, the authors tell us that David and Ruth married the day before they left for Philadelphia with Martha and Mary, the sisters of Lazarus. This is the last we hear of Ruth and David in the Urantia book, but I suspect there are people somewhere who can count Ruth and David as two of their noble ancestors.